We're going to begin. So last week we had an amazing share, and when I got home, actually when I finished here, I realized I didn't record it. So I came back home and I did a re-record, and I did it in 25 minutes or so. I did just the ideas that need to come out. I did that, but the whole going through, I forgot to press record. So this week I did press record already, so we're good to go. We're good to go. I did a 20, I think 23-minute review, kind of like the main points that came out. So I posted that review. If anyone who wants to go through that, you have it there. But today we're starting in Hilchot Bishul, Shir Gimel, which is really our part 6. We are on page 95 in the Tzurba Banan, volume 18. Again, this is the Yakir Hexter and David Schwartz volume. They were chavutot in the yeshiva, and they were soldiers and the battlefield. Page 95. Page 95. Okay. So today we're going to start off with the first topic we're starting off with today is, in our heads, is very simple. We're going to have to go through the actual sources about using ice. Taking ice, which is solid and cold, and putting it into a drink, l'mashal, right? Which is taking it from cold and solid to making it liquid, right? And warm. Is that touch on Bishul? Maybe. Maybe. In addition, what about if I crush the ice to make water? So just putting it in a cup might just be a grumma. I just cause it indirectly. But if I crush the ice to get water, would that be an issue? So let's start off in source 33.
Something like this, I just want to say, anything it's gonna happen later on in a different form, naturally. No, it's like
So
it did nothing.
We're gonna come to a conclusion.
The ice is gonna be water afterwards. There's no problem.
We're gonna come at the end to a conclusion. There are certain foods, for example, fatty foods, congealed fat.
Right.
Okay. If I warm it up, it becomes liquid.
Right.
So is it lach? Is it a liquid?
Yeah.
Or is it considered a solid? If it's a solid, I can reheat it. If it's a liquid, I can't reheat it. What is it? So today, Bezat Hashem will come out with some yisoda, some ideas, some main points of what's going on. But let's start off with the first source. Gemara Masechah Shabbat. It's actually a Tosefta. Okay. And the Tosefta says as follows. The Ein Marzikin, okay, which means you can't crush, lo et hasheleg, not snow, below et habarad, and not hail, which is ice stones, b'Shabbat. You can't crush snow or ice on Shabbat, b'shvil she'yazuv meimav. So you should have water flowing from it.
Don't crush it, but you could live it.
Okay, hold on. So the first piece of the chapter said you can't take a piece of ice and crush it for water to come out. You can't take snow and crush it to make water come out actively. Okay, fine. Aval noten hu litoch hakos or litoch hake'ara ve'eno hoshesh. You could put it into a cup or into a plate, and you don't have to be worried about it.
Right.
Melt by itself.
Yeah.
Also, when it says putting it in a cup or into a plate, is that an empty cup? Or is that a cup with liquid in there? Okay, it doesn't say here. It just says b'tachakos.
Right.
Okay, so this is what we have first. The statement, the Tanaic statement that Tosefta in our Gemara tells us, you can't actively crush ice, but you can put it into a cup or a plate and let it melt. So Rashi, right, where would we be with that Rashi? Rashi is going to explain why this is. So source 34. Rashi said, now, you can't crush it. Why? Mishum deka moilid b'Shabbos. Because you are creating, Rashi comes up with this new thing called molid, okay? Creating something on Shabbat. The dummy the malacha. It's not a malacha.
Dame.
It's similar to a malacha.
Only dame.
Comparable to a malacha.
Marit ein.
It's not an actual malacha. Not one of the 39 malachas. But it looks like a malacha because you're creating something. Shiboreh hamayim ha'elu. because he's creating this water. The Rashi says it's molid, you're creating, it's something that you're making on Shabbos, so it looks like it's like a malacha. Therefore, you can't do it. But if you put it into a cup, now Rashi's cup, what's Rashi's cup?
Yain.
Shayayin. So there's something inside the cup.
Because he's making wine.
This is the way Rashi understands it. This is inside, he's putting it in a cup that has a liquid in there. A bimota chamo, kedelit sanen, you want to put it into the wine in order to cool it, right? You want to make it nice. It's hot outside, you make it cool nice.
Yeah.
And even though it's going to melt on its own, we're not worried. Okay? So Rashi explains the Tosefta that actively doing it, you're creating something.
No good.
That's a problem. Looks like you're doing malach on Shabbos. It's not malach, but it looks like it. Putting it there, it melts on its own. It's a grama. It's okay. Okay? That is one way to explain this Tosefta. Is going to be three ways. Okay? Three Rishonim. Rashi is the first Rishon we saw. That's the first explanation. Comes now on page 96. And we have the Sefer HaTerumah. The Sefer HaTerumah, he says, not because of molid. Molid means active. You're making something. He says it's aser mipnei shehu nolad, because it's produced. It happens. Okay, and nolad, something that is nolad, for example, something that's nolad on Yom Tov, right? It's muksa, right? Sachas beitza, right? Nolad, something that's created on Shabbos or Yom Tov, is a muksa. So says the Sefer HaTerumah, it might be aser because of something being produced on Shabbat. Now he throws in another idea. He says not only ice, v'chein nira she'aser litate pashtiyada or peshatida. Okay, what is pashtida? What type of kugel?
Potato.
Nah, potato. These guys are meat people. All right, Talmudical period. Rishonim. So it's like it's congealed fat. Okay, so you have it's fat that congeals. It gets hard. Okay, you're allowed to take pashtida. It's aser to take congealed fat. The me'acharif b'tzad eish l'chamim b'yom haShabbos lefei shamnunis. It's fat. Sheyeshba nikrash. It's solid. V'nasa av the kafui v'atan nimche v'nasa tzelul v'havi nolad. So says the Sefer HaTerumah. You know what's the problem with crushing ice? Something gets produced from that. And that's an isser. You're right. It's changing the form. And he says that's why if you take congealed fat and you want to warm it up, that would be a problem also. Because it's changing from a solid into a liquid. It's being nolad and it's happening. And that might be a muksa problem, he says. Okay? Now, but he says you could put in hail of chatichas barad shikoring gilatza. Okay, there's a certain type of hail that would fall in Germany. They were called gilatza. I've heard about this before. I never heard this before. Karka, and they would then put it into the land. They would take out the hail from inside the ground. And with sanino, ze mutar. That's mutar. Now, why is that mutar? Sham the havi garmi almo. First of all, to garmi almo, you're not really doing it. You're not crushing it. You're not making it. You're not producing something. But further, he says, the shehabarad nimcha azhu mitarev umitbatel bayayin shebekos ve'en nikar. It's not recognizable. And you put the ice into your cup, you don't know what's the ice anymore, right? The ice produced into water, but you don't know where it's the water. Even if it's a wine, even if it's a soda, whatever it is. The ice dissolves in my cup, and that's it. Nobody knows where that liquid went. Okay, so it's mitbata.
It's gonna be happening later on without you do anything. It's gonna be water, so it's okay. It's mutar. You know what I'm saying?
So he's saying it happens on its own.
Yeah.
But his lashon is azu mitarev umitpatel beyayin. It gets mixed and mivatel in the wine. The ain nakir, and it's not visible. Lonika. Okay, and that's his distinction. Okay, so let's go back. The Tosefta said you can't crush it. According to the Sefer HaTruma, you can't crush it because crushing it is nolad. You're creating something, which might be muktzah. All right, it's producing from solid to liquid. Same thing with fat. You can't warm up congealed fat because it becomes liquid. That's a problem. Okay, when is it allowed? It's when it's passive, when you're just putting the ice into the water, and when it's in the water, it gets mixed up in the water, and it's bottled in the water, and you don't see it, and that's why it's permissible. That's the way the Sefer HaTruma explains. So you have Rashi, he's talking about molid, something that looks like a malacha and doesn't look like a malacha. And now you have nolad, something that's produced versus something that's not recognizable. Now comes the third shita, the third way of understanding it, which halacha we seem to go with this explanation. And this is the Rashba. Rashba, first of all, he says, he first makes the distinction that Rashi and the Sefer HaTruma are two separate opinions. There's nolad and there's molid, right? And they're two separate. One is muksa and one is something that looks like a malach. But then he says, furthermore, one second. According to the Sefer HaTruma, if the problem that it's nolad, right, that it's something that's being produced, well, guess what? Even if I don't see it, it's still being produced. So it should still be a problem. So comes the Rashba, and the Rashba says, V'li nira, that the reason why the Tosefta said you can't crush it, but you can let it melt, Dimishum Gzeras Schita. Schita de perot. Because you can't squeeze fruit to make fruit juice on Shabbos. So we make a gezerah that you can't squeeze ice to make water. That's what the Rashba says the issue is. All right?
It's not the same.
It's close enough to make a gezerah. Okay? The Paris Ha'imdin, Lamashkin, Nego, Bob Nesha Barba Shalik, Lamayim, Hain Oimdim, Lefikach, take the Toch Kos, Mutter, She'eno, Nira, Kesochet. So when you put the ice in the water, it doesn't look like you're squeezing it. When you're crushing it, it looks like you're squeezing. But when you're just putting it in the water, it doesn't look like you're squeezing. And so that's why it's okay. Now the Magid Mishnah, he brings that this is the way the Rambam learns the halacha as well. Why? How do you know the Rambam? The Rambam doesn't say beferish, but the Rambam brings the issue of crushing ice in Hilchos Schita. Okay, in Hilchos Schita of squeezing fruits, that's where he brings the halachot of not crushing ice, meaning that the Rambam understood, like the Rashba, that what the issue here is the gzer of Schita of squeezing fruit juice. Okay.
Therefore, you're not allowed if it's gzera.
And that's why you're not allowed to crush ice on Shabbos. Okay, that's why you're not allowed to crush ice.
Leave it into a drink.
Yeah.
Because now you're not squeezing it. You're not crushing anything, so it doesn't look like you're squeezing fruits. Okay, here I'm going to read it to you in the Yalkut Yosef. He writes very nicely over here, and he explains it very nice. Aser l'rsak b'yadayim, l'rasek b'yadayim, b'shabbat sheleg ubarak. You cannot squeeze, you cannot crush snow or ice. Dahainu l'shvarim b'sachin or b'kaf l'chatichas dakas kadesh yazu b'memehem. You cannot do it with a knife or with a spoon in order to get the water. Why? Because perhaps you can then come to squeeze grapes and other things, and that is the issue over here. Shehu mifarek told the dash. Shechem shebeschitas anovim moitzi mashka midavar acher kach kan moitzi mashka mishel gabarit. Of a mutter letate otam letoich koishel yain noimayim vehein milchem aleim vehein choishesh. So that is the halacha l'maaseh. Halacha l'maaseh, we understand this Tosefta like the Rashba and the Rambam. That what the issue here is, it's comparable to squeezing fruits. And so when you actually actively crush the ice, that's when it's compared to squeezing fruit. And when you put it in the cup, that's not squeezing nothing. Therefore, that is mutar. Okay? That's the first thing we're going to get into. Now, we have to come back to this pashtida. Okay, this pashtida was the congealed fat. Okay?
Yeah.
Took this, it was a kugel made out of congealed fat, and now I want to put it by the fire. Okay? Now, does that look, if the whole issue here is because of schita, because of squeezing, does this look like squeezing? No. Right? So look at source 39, the Sefer Mitzvahs Katan, the Smak. He writes, V'lechamam hapashtida, ein iser bishvil, shenimcha hashumen she'ein oisim beyadayim. Since you're not doing it with your hands, right? Since you're not squeezing it with your hands actively, so it doesn't look like squeezing fruit, and therefore you're allowed to warm up congealed fat. That's what he says. Says the Shulchan Aruch in source 40. It says the Shulchan Aruch in source 40. Mutter litain anpanda. Okay, this goes back to the impandas. The impandas is basically, like you said before, gosh kajeh samsa. Empanadas. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a Spanish food. And what it is, it's a bread, and inside is meats and stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Samsa, gosh, that's what it is. So inside there is congealed fats. Okay, because you have the food, and then you put it in the refrigerator, wherever it is, the ice box, it's cold outside.
This the congealed fat was already mevujat.
But there is bishul by liquid. So is it liquid or is it not? We'll have to deal with that in a moment. But said the Shulchan Aruch, mutter litain and panda keneged the eish mokum, but mokum shehayatzu ledisbo. You're even allowed to make it so hot. Okay, so he's holding like you ain't bishul or bishul, no problem. It's solid. We'll have to deal with that in a moment. But for now, and even though the solid fat in it, which is solid at this moment, will melt and become a liquid, it's permissible to put it by the fire.
No, but this is not solid. This has become liquid.
Okay, so maybe the amount of congealed fat makes a difference. So Ashkenazim, for Ashkenazim, it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, but our father Yosef, he doesn't.
Shulchan Aruch says you can put congealed fat by the fire, by Yatzel Eduspo. Okay. Now the Ramah and the Haggah, the Ramah says the Yesh Machmirin, and there are those who are Machmir. B'nohagu lahachmir, mihu b'mokum tzarich yesh lismoch hasvara rishona. Says the Ramah, really, you should not warm up congealed fats. Why? Why not? Because the Ramah really holds like the Sefer HaTruma. And he holds that it's nolad. And it's changing from a solid to a liquid. And so you're producing liquid. And it's a problem. But he says, but Makam Tzarach, you can hold like the Rashba and the Rambam, that it is a problem of schita and not of nolad.
But this is the same thing like ice. Like ice. If you leave it outside, after a while,
that's correct.
It's gonna be liquid.
That is correct.
So there's no problem.
That is correct.
So if the ice you are allowed also this. לא, אני אומר, אם אתה...
So what was the Sefer HaTruma's difference by ice? He said ice that's in a cup is eino nicker. You can't see it. Because you don't know it's nolad. It's mit'ariv and mitbatel. It's mixed and it's mivatel. There is no nolad.
What about if you put in an empty cup?
According to Ashkenazim, that's going to be usher. We're going to get there. Let me get there. Okay, let me get there.
Really?
Yeah, let me get there. You're right, but they're saying it's nolad. And it's nicker. It's talking about the ice. Okay, but you're skipping steps. Let's go through the steps. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch says that you're allowed to warm up congealed fat. The Ramah says no. The Ramah really holds like the Sefer HaTruma that says it's a problem of Noah. Okay, the Mishnah Berurah says, why does the Ramah say that you're allowed to hold it a Svara Rishona in a Makam Tzarech? It says Hainu the Azar fil lechatchila mutar. When it's a Makam Tzarech, even lechatchila you're allowed to heat it up. It's never usher. Because remember, you learned by Hilchot Shabbat, if there is an authoritative shita that says it's mutter, even if it's not your shita, right? The food does not become usher. Okay, so if someone came and put the soup on the blech, you don't have to say you can't eat the soup because according to the Timanim, right? According to the Rambam, you're allowed to warm it up, so the food never becomes usher. Okay, shouldn't do it for Sfaradim, Ashkenazim, but it doesn't become usher. Same thing here. Whenever there's an authoritative shita that allows it, it can't become the food cannot become usher. Now, before we move on to see the other sections of this, just to look at the Yalkut Joseph, we talked about congealed fat. So outside of the
Rabbi Moshe.
Yes.
There's a question on the chat.
Yes. What's the question? You want me to read it? Chat.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
like 3 questions.
Is it permitted to put ice in an empty glass and let it sit and melt? We didn't get there yet. What if one adds a liquid to the cup and ice immediately? We'll get to there too. What if liquid is added after the melting process already started? What is, according to Rambam, what is time of need? What is time of need? Where did the Rambam talk about time of need? Okay. Well, most of these questions will all be dealt with in a minute. Okay.
But you know,
1 second.
I want to say, usually when you go to places, I'm saying what the olam doing. They take ice, a lot of ice, they put in an empty thing, and let people take ice and put it. So we see.
And then the question would be: are you allowed to drink the water that comes in the bottom of that bowl?
But I'm talking about the ice now.
Oh,
If I want to,
specifically
I want to
the
drink.
ice now.
For us, it would be no problem. Then it would be a problem. But 1 second.
Okay.
Now, he writes over here, if someone places a pot of food to be warmed up on Shabbat and there's a layer of congealed fat, I want you to make note of what he says here. There's a layer of congealed fat.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna deal with that in a moment, something else. And the gravy in the pot that will melt in the heat. One may eat that food, including the gravy. It's permissible to warm up such a pot of food, even if one knows that this will happen. Okay? This cannot be compared to crushing snow. It's not like crushing snow or ice, which is a problem, right? Since no action is taken to melt the fat, it simply melts by itself. Ashkenazic Jews don't do this. Since melted fat is something new, it's nolad. It's like the Sefer Truma. So they don't do this unless there is a need, and then it becomes permissible. What's the Malkum Tzarech? You'll have to ask them what becomes the Malkum Tzarech. Okay.
Malkum Tzarech, there's no other food.
No other food. Okay.
That's it.
All right. Malkum Tzarech means I really need that food. No, I don't know. Okay, fine. Now go to the next source on page 98, source 42. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Shelg v'abared ein marsikinotam. The Hainu l'shavram l'chaticha istalkos kadesh yazuvim meimav. Of a noitain hu l'tach kaishel yayin l'mayim hu nimuch meilav and choshish v'chein emanicham b'chama o keneged hamidura v'nifsaru moiterim. Right? If they melt by the sun, right, or close to the fire, that's also permitted. So Shulchan Aruch is very clear. When it comes to ice, as long as you are not causing the ice to be melted, you're just letting something else melt it, whether in the cup, in the sun, it remains mutar. Okay? Says the Mishnah Berurah explaining this. Who adin the mutar lechatchila lehaniach. Kiven shememela hu nimuach v'chemola torchakos. The ledat Ramah, but according to the Ramah, gam hacha yesh lahachmer. According to the Ashkenazim, they cannot do this. They cannot just let the ice melt. Okay? The after meilab isr mishum noad. The aina daimul l'teichakois. The hatam hu me'urav b'mayim ve'eno nicker. Since it's not recognizable and it's mixed in the water. So for us, you can just take out the ice. Just don't do it with your own hand. Let it melt. Let it melt in a cup. Let it melt in the sun. Let it melt in a plate. You can put it in anything you want to do. It says just don't do it yourself. For Ashkenazim, the only time they can use ice is when they put the ice into something, and you don't know, you cannot see what it's producing.
Therefore, it cannot be changed because when you put it in a different temperature, the wine is warmer.
Yeah.
When you drop it, the ice, then you cause the ice to melt.
Yeah.
But if you put the ice in a plate or in a cup by its own,
Right.
so it should be opposite.
That what?
You're you're causing the ice to melt.
I hear you.
Changing the
I hear you.
wine
But
is in
their
the room temperature.
issue is Nola. That it's changing to something else, right? The only way to get away from Nolad is if you don't see the Nolad happen. That's the way the Ramah is learning. If you don't see the nolad happening, then it's mutter. If you see the nolad happening, you can't have it. Right. That's the exact idea. Right? Because that's what he says. It's mit'arev u'mitbatel ve'enu nikar. You can't see it.
Take the ice above, napkin, I bump my head, like this. Not in the cup. First canal.
You do this is
What?
something else completely.
No,
What
it's
you
not.
do?
They're using the ice on their forehead.
Bump my head, I put my eyes right now. Hold the napkin.
Yeah, this is the law. This is not. Oh,
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know.
Oh, it's a for refuah.
All right. Now,
Problem.
that's a problem. No lie. Yeah. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it.
Bump your head.
You shouldn't do it. Maisa wouldn't be usher because there's a shita that allows it, right? We like the Mishnah Berurah said, anything that is a good shita, doesn't become usher, right? You shouldn't. They don't do it because the problem of nolad, but it's not usher. Still, it's nolad because it's nicker. It's recognizable.
The resulting water, you have to dump.
It's not usher to use it. It's not usher. No. Okay. It says in Mishnah Berurah. He says, by the way, this pashtida that the Ramah said you can't warm up because it's nolad. It says, but guess what? If the pashtida doesn't have so much fat, it's the diet pashtida, okay? So it's a little bit congealed fat. So it's going to get absorbed into the dough. So you're not going to see. So then that will be okay. All right? He said that would be okay. To all opinions, even according to the Ramah, because they no nicker. And the issue is that it's nicker or not. That's what the Ashkenazim come out. It's the issue of nolad that is recognizable or not.
What do you mean no nicker? You see the liquid coming.
Yeah, but you don't see it oozing out.
You see a little bit.
You don't see it oozing
a lot.
out. A little bit, it's okay. It's a small amount.
Okay.
Okay, that's what the Mishnah Berurah says. So now you come to the Orchot Shabbat on page 99. Right, this is a contemporary sefer, and this is for Ashkenazim. And he says one takes out congealed fish sauce. So some of the gefilte fish comes with congealed. You put it in the refrigerator a long time, it's congealed. Okay, Moroccan salmon is congealed. Okay, can't say gefilte fish here. All right, I'm getting censored. What I could say. Okay.
It's a thing Moroccan salmon.
The salmon that gets the sauce gets congealed because of the.
So one takes congealed fish out of the fridge and liquefies by itself. It's permitted to eat. That's what I
When it
said.
comes out of the jar.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Look at source
that.
45. Source 45, 47. He writes, one who wishes to heat pieces of chicken or meat. One who wishes to heat chicken or meat must distinguish between two situations for Ashkenazim. Okay, so they have chicken or meat and they want to warm it up. They have to look at their chicken and meat. One,
כמה שומן יש לו? אתה מסתכל כמה שומן יש שם.
if there's a large amount of fat
הנה, ראית?
or congealed sauce, one should not heat it,
אסור.
as the fat will liquefy and it's nolad and it's recognizable. So you can't do it.
Yeah.
All right. If it's a makom tzarech, then mutter, right? Makom tzarech is mutter.
חולה, חולה. זה חולה.
Okay. We'll deal with this also shortly. The next piece, he's talking about an uncongealed sauce. If it's uncongealed sauce, one may not heat it on Shabbat because then it's already liquid. All right. So this is what I was talking to you before. Is it liquid? Is it solid?
לא, לא, הוא אומר שזה לא קנג'יל. כלומר,
קנג'יל, אבל כשאתה אומר...
לא, הוא אומר שזה כמו
Sauce.
מים.
It's a regular sauce.
כמו מים.
Sauce is like sauce would be liquid. Liquid we
Yeah.
only heat on Shabbat.
קנג'יל,
Okay.
נשאר שהוא נהיה...
Now,
כן, כן, קראו.
now,
לא, אבל עכשיו הוא אומר משהו אחר.
now, if it's just
Now
sauce,
it's just-
right? It's not congealed sauce.
Okay.
Now it's liquid sauce, so you can't reheat it on Shabbat because it's liquid. Okay. Now the next thing,
רוטב, רוטב.
second case, if the chicken or meat doesn't have any fat and doesn't have so much on it, then heating them is no problem because it's not nicker, it's not visible, so it's no issue. So Ashkenazim have to take out the fish and making chicken, and they have to take a look how much congealed stuff I have in it. Maybe you have to remove the and the problem with removing it, but one should not remove the congealed sauce because of borer. You're starting to sort. So before Shabbat, if they're going to warm it up, they have to prepare it that it's not congealed stuff on it. Very minimum.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, they may not be able to heat it up. Us, not a problem to a certain extent. We'll see what the issue by us is. Now, in the second over here on page 100, he deals here with the ice. So again, Ashkenazim. This is all for Ashkenazim. Okay. I'll go through the Al Joseph for us for Sfaradim, but let's take a look first at Ashkenazim. When we not crush ice or snow, which we all old this. Placing ice cubes in water is permitted. Now, what about crushing it when I already put it into water? Okay. I want my ice to melt fast in my water. So it's in the water. No, not shaking.
Mix it.
I'm taking a spoon and I'm trying to make it mix up fast. Can I do that? So it really depends. What you hold the issue of ice is. If you say it's nolad, the issue of nolad that it's nicker, can you recognize it or not? Since it's already in the liquid, I don't recognize it. So I can smash it up in the liquid. What's the issue by Sfaradim? What do we say, like the Rash from the Rambam? The issue of melting ice is schita, is squeezing it, the juice. Well, guess what? Even if it's in the liquid, I'm still doing schita in it. That would be a problem. All right. So here he says, poskim dispute whether you can crush it. Many poskim permit this. In fact, there's a Tosefta that says this as well. But for us, Sephardim, we do not say that. And we say over here, listen to this. Some poskim ruled that our sages did not forbid crushing snow inside a cup or a bowl. In practice, we must refrain from crushing snow in the cup or even stirring it around to speed its melting into liquid into the cup, because the issue of schita still exists inside. If I take an orange and I squeeze it under the water, what? It's not going to still squeeze orange juice. It's the problem. It's squeezing. Same thing with the ice. Okay, so for us, we would not be able to put it into a cup and crush it. But Ashkenazim would have to put it into a cup and crush it because they hold the issue is of nolad and being visible. Okay. Okay. Now, okay, look at number 43 over there in the bottom, the last one from the Orchat Shabbat. If one placed ice cubes into an empty bowl and they melted into the water, right? One may drink the water. Some write that it's best to refrain from drinking them if it's not a case of need. So some Ashkenazim say, even if it's melted in the bowl, don't drink it. Why? Because it's not in a liquid that it melted. It melted on its own. And that would be a problem of nolad. Right? So they say not to drink it. Well, others would say, no, it's, the whole push, I put it there, it's for the ice, it's not for, I didn't mean for it to melt, whatever it is. Okay, just take a look for a second on the Yalkut Yosef and some more on the chod about crushing ice. So he says over here, what about if I have ice in the cup? You told me I can't go in and crush it. What about like Rabbi Tzion said, I take it and I swirl the cup like this. Can I do that?
No, this is in the cup, is no problem.
So he says to shake the cup is permissible. Because do you squeeze oranges by shaking it? No. So by us, the issue is schita. If it's not schita, it's permissible. If it's schita, it's not permissible. That's the issue. Okay? What? We're not going with no. That's Ashkenazim. This would also be permissible to them because it's a nikar. You can't see that I'm melting it. You don't see the melting. Yeah, they hold crushing it inside might be okay. Some say no, but if you go straight with nolad, that wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know. He says swirling, stirring the cup.
If you take the idea of the Ashkenazim and that is Faradim, then everything is awesome. Everything mutar.
Everything mutar.
Everything mutar. They say you are allowed to crush, and we say you are allowed to shake. So it's no problem.
Okay. Fine. Now we have one more issue to deal with before we end up this section, and we can actually do it in the next section. Okay, let's do the next piece, and then we'll do this last idea. Okay. Page 101. Now, the Shulchan Aruch said, I can take my empanada, all right, what was it called again? Empanada. It has congealed fat. I can put it next to the fire. That's yatsu ledidbo on Shabbat. So source 47 on page 101, the Labush goes wild. Okay? And the Labush says, Yatsa Ledisbo? What second? There's a problem of Bishul. There's a problem of Bishul. Maybe the Lavush is understanding it as a liquid, because eventually it's going to become a liquid. So you're reheating a liquid, and reheating a liquid on Shabbos is an Isser of Bishul. So he says, rather it was a mistake. Okay, the ta'ut nafal b'shulchan aruch. Take away the word yatsa ledidbo. It should have said ein yatsa ledidbo. You can warm up an empanada if it's not next to yatsa ledidbo, says the Lavush. Lavush says it was a mistake. Should not have said yatsa ledidbo. Should have said ein yatsa ledidbo. But the Magen Avraham says no such doing. The Magen Avraham says veli nira deloidami. The hacha kivan shenitzvashel kvar. Once you already cooked the empanada, v'hu yavash, and now it is dry, right? It's a solid. Em bo mishum bishul. So Magen Avraham is saying that once something is dry, cooked and dry now, I don't care if I warm it up and liquefies. You go with right now. The Lavush is worried about what it turns into. Magen Avraham is not worried about what it turns into. The Mishnah Berurah says, "V'atam shemuter dekivin shehu yavesh afshin itztanan v'shayich bebiyushul oid v'chmoy shekosem b'sif tesvav alfa pisha ashrumin chayzev v'nemuch v'kol makom mikra yavesh kivin shebeshashin notanu lechamimo v'nimcha adayin." So Bishul Berurah says one step further. He says, when you're placing it to warm up, what is it at that moment? And if at that moment it is
solid,
then even if it liquefies later, it's considered a solid and you're allowed to warm it up. Okay? So 3 steps here so far. The Lavush said, it should have said, En Yatz Ledisbo, because I'm worried it's turning into a liquid, and that's liquid warming up, and that's Bishul Acher Bishul by liquid, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay? That's Lavush.
He doesn't
The
hold
Magen Avraham says, not a problem. Okay? What was it? What is it now? And the Bishul Berurah says, what is it now when you're putting it? Okay, what is it? Mashu Sham. Right, Kasher Sham. Okay, now the what about this? And this is the question. I took a soup. Okay? Took a soup and I froze the soup. What's the soup now? 1 second. What's the soup now? It's solid. It's a solid. So now, if it's a solid, ain't Bishul Acher Bishul when it's something completely cooked, right? And it's solid. So I can go ahead and put my soup. If we went with this idea. Okay, we're not going to go with this idea.
Changing the water.
But 1 second, you told me the Magen Avraham said the kibbutz shenitvashel kvar v'hu yavish ain't bo b'shum bishul. Once I already cooked it and it's dry, it's a solid. There's no more bishul. So maybe it's ice. What's ice? Why not?
Yeah.
What is it?
Water.
Well, you just tell me a whole issue. It's not water. If you crush it, you're squeezing. Don't crush it because it's ice and you're turning it into a liquid.
That is solid. Because actually, you let it sit, it's going to be solid.
So take a look in the Orchot Shabbat at source 50 on page 102. So in the bold part over there, he says, okay, so we'll start from the top over there. He says, the rational Magen Avraham, he needs requirement, he needs an explanation. The fat will ultimately liquefy, and reheating liquid is significant enough to constitute malacha. One must say that since the congealed fat is also a solid food, it's a food, right? Congealed fat I can eat. It's a solid food. And while it's congealed, it fits the description of a cooked item. Okay? We follow the moment it's placed on the fire. And one is placing a dry item. Therefore, even though it ends in liquefaction, when I put it, it was food. And you go with the moment I put it because it was food. Based on this, it seemed there's no leniency to place chicken soup that congeals in the refrigerator and becomes like jelly, or freeze it in the freezer. You cannot put that on the fire to heat because it's considered a liquid. Because at the moment you took the frozen soup, could you have eaten it? No. So it's not a food item. That's what the Orchat Shabbat wants to say. Even though it's a solid, it's already cooked, it's not a food item. That's what Sion was trying to get at. He says, not a food item. I can eat, I can see the congealed fat being something I can eat, but I can't eat a frozen food. So in the Melechet Shabbat over here, Melechet Bishul, this beautiful sefer over here, this is Halacha L'Maaseh L'Bnei Edot HaMizrach, and he writes over here, explaining this very, very nicely. He writes, if the food is solid at room temperature, then whether it was always solid or later congealed and became solid, it retains the status of a solid. So he's saying a little more than what we were saying here. At room temperature, if you leave this thing at room temperature, if it's a solid, it always remains a solid, even if heating it will melt it or uncongeal it, even immediately. As long as at room temperature, it stays a solid. Okay? However, if a food is only a solid because it was frozen or refrigerated to the point of congealing, but if placed at room temperature will melt, then it is considered a liquid.
Jello, we consider it congealed. In other words, it's
Liquid.
considered to be a food item.
Jello is a food item, sure.
It's not liquid.
Is it liquid?
That's what I meant.
It gets hard even without putting it in the refrigerator. Yeah, even without refrigerator, it gets hard. Right. So at a room temperature, it would be solid.
No, but Jello never become
And what we're saying right now, based on what we're saying right now.
Jello
So he
never
says over here.
become liquid.
So okay, get the idea over here. This is very important. This is the way we pass it. That what's a solid? If it's a solid at room temperature, cooked, and now it's a solid room temperature, that is considered a solid. If it's something that's a solid, you put it in the refrigerator, and if you leave it at room temperature, it won't remain a solid, then that's considered a liquid. And so he writes over here, you are not allowed to take already, listen, you're not allowed to take already cooked soup that congealed in the refrigerator and reheat it on Shabbat. You can't do that. Okay?
That was the food that was in the solid, not in the fridge. The food is gonna be liquid.
So technically, if it remains a solid at room temperature, then it's considered a solid and you're allowed to reheat it on Shabbat.
The liquid after
Yeah, that's what we saw. That's the impanda. That's what the Magen Avraham said. That's what Mishnah Berurah said. The congealed fat becomes a liquid. The congealed fat becomes a liquid. He's telling me it's solid. I don't know what it is. Is it solid at room temperature? If it's solid at room temperature, it's considered a solid food, and you can heat it up. That's fine. Look what he said. Look what he said. If the food is solid room temperature, whether it was always solid or became solid later on, as long as it's solid at room temperature, it remains a status of solid, even if heating it will melt it or uncongeal it immediately. Even if I leave it on the block for 1 minute, it becomes liquid, that's fine. As long as at room temperature, it is solid. That's the halacha l'maaseh. Okay? Good? Everybody has it clear. Okay.
That's a lot of, you have a lot of fish, and you have a lot of sauce. Is the sauce congealed? Is it considered, or is it considered
הוא נהיה
water?
קשה, אני לא ראיתי אותו.
we
אני לא
have-
ראיתי אותו,
So you have another tzad.
אני לא ראיתי אותו מוקרש. לא, אם הוא היה מוקרש, אני הייתי זורק את זה, אתה יודע. אתה תגיד לי, אני אוכל, תעשה לי טוב. אני נאם בבעיה של מוקרשות, תקשיב, אני לא אוכל מחומה. פעם שנייה, אם הוא נכנס למקרר, is dead. בשבילי. אני יודע מה זה, כן, אני לא יכול לסבול את הקלישה הזאת.
Hold on a second. First of all, if you have solid, Sion, if you have a solid with congealed, first of all, is the congealed a solid or not? If it's a solid room temperature, congealed is solid. Even if it's not solid, if the majority of the item is a solid and you have liquid, you can still warm it up for Sfaradim. Okay?
mostly.
So we went through this. You weren't here that week, but we have it on recorded. But we went through this. Okay, so we talked about what a majority is and when it's not. But for Sfaradim, simply if it's a majority is solid, you can warm it up. We don't look at it 50-49. It has to look majority solid. It goes with the look of majority solid. Okay, and that's where you warm it up for now.
Somebody told me no. Majority means 95%.
No. That's Ashkenazim. That's what I said. Okay, we're not going to get into that now. Now, someone asked the question: what if a Sephardi family hosts Ashkenazim? Can we follow our rules?
Follow the house.
And it always follows the house, and they have no issue because as long as there's an authoritative shita, they can rely on that as well. Okay, same thing. If I go to a Temani family and they're warming up soup, I can eat that soup, no problem. Okay, now you can't tell the Ashkenaz guy to go do what if he's putting ice in his cup, he has to do whatever he has to do. That's his own business. But you in your house, you do it the way you do, and they have no issue of eating from you because as long as you're following an authoritative shita, they have no issue. Yes, every week. And then after he's finished by you, send them to me. Okay, fine. One more section over here before we move on to the next topic. What about making ice and jello on Shabbat? Okay, what about making ice? Okay, so what would be the issue of making ice? Ice, I have liquid, and I'm changing it into a solid. So what would be the issue there? What is it? Nolad or mullet, right? Rashi would be mullet. He's creating something. Nolad is producing something new. But did we say that was the issue for us when it comes to ice?
No.
No, our problem was schita. So let's take a look. Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata says, and he's very medactic in his lashon. The Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata. He says, "Toiv, it's good. Lehemta miltet b'Shabbat Yom Tov mayim l'toch teh hakafa manat le'ofchim lekubiyut, right? To make it into ice. Elim ken yishtzarach gadol b'kach." Says the Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata for Ashkenazim, don't make ice on Shabbat unless you have a tzarach gadol. Why? It's the issue of nolad. And remember, the Ramah said only b'makom tzarach. So you have a makom tzarach. It's very hot outside. You really need ice. Maybe that's considered enough of a makom tzarach. You can make ice on Shabbat according to Hashem. Otherwise, you should not make it. And Orlet Tzion, he says that the Shulchan Aruch she'em bezeh isur nolad. The whole idea of not crushing ice is not because of nolad. It's because of schita. And guess what? When I'm making ice, there's no schita there, right? So therefore, you're allowed to make ice on Shabbat. You can fill it up and put it in the freezer.
If it's Shabbat itself, okay. There's too much ice.
So what are you talking about? Making ice for Shabbat? Making ice for Shabbat. Okay, I'm not telling you to go make ice for the whole week now. I'm making ice for Shabbat. Okay, it's with a family with a couple of kids, a couple of adults. You're going through a lot of ice on one seudah. Okay, so you can make as much ice as you need, right? As needed. As long as you think you're going to need it, you can make it, no problem. He says, right, shlo b'yadayim. You're not doing it with your hands. Nothing direct. You're not squeezing. You're not making ice. You're not sitting there and making ice. You can't do that. So it's not. It's just a grama. The aim is from nolad v'shari. We don't look at nolad. It's no problem. Schita. You can go ahead and make ice. Says the Orlet Tzion. The Masoret Moshe. This is Rav Moshe Feinstein. Is quoted that he quoted Rav Henkin. Rav Henkin was one of the early Gedolei Yisrael here in America before in the 1920s, early. He had all the questions of Chalav Stam and all these things that are mutter is really based on Rav Henkin. A lot of it is based on him. And he writes that it's permitted to make ice on Shabbat. So even for Ashkenazim, there's an opinion that it's permitted to make ice on Shabbat. Right? He says because no one mentioned otherwise.
Right.
Okay? Nowhere in Chazal do you find, because they had cold air in the winter,
Yeah.
right? And the Rishonim lived
If you
in
leave something
Europe
outside,
where it was very cold, and no one said, "Oh, don't leave your water outside. You can make nolad." No one wrote it anywhere. So Moshe says, based on that, it's not an issue to make. There's no problem making ice on Shabbat. Although they also quote him that he writes, unless it's absolutely necessary, unless you really need it. All right, because maybe it's a nolad issue. Okay, Lamaisa, what do we hold? We hold that you can definitely make ice. What would be the issue of freezing food? I would say freezing food is less of an issue. You're not changing the state of the food. You're not going from a solid to a liquid to a solid. You're staying from a solid to a solid. Ah, so that's a different issue. That's a different issue. If it is a chana, it's a different issue. But we're not gonna get into that right now. Okay, now. Halacha l'maaseh for us Sephardim, making ice on Shabbat, no problem. Okay, now the next case, Jello or jelly. I don't know what do you call them in Israel. Making Jello, jelly. Okay, Rabotai, making Jello on Shabbat. Can I make Jello on Shabbat? Jello, instant Jello. They have the powder. You throw it into the water, right, and it becomes a Jello. Okay, let's say it's a kosheni. Okay, I'm not. It has to be warm water. Can't be done with cold water, right? Okay, so it's a kosheni, right? It's kosheni. It's koshlishi. It's definitely not a problem with Bishul. Can I make Jello? Okay, so let's take a look. This guy always wants to eat everything right away. Okay. All right. So the Shevet HaLevi, all right, so this is Rav Wozner. He says, someone asked me, making instant Jello. You mix powder in water, this powder dissolves in the water, and it forms something similar to raspberry water, and after a few minutes, it becomes like a thick soup. And if one places it in the refrigerator and waits a little more, it becomes more solidified. What would be the issue? So first he says, Le'aniyat dati lehachmir. Says Rav Wozner, you shouldn't do it. Why? Lahamid b'Shabbat l'mkar. You shouldn't put it in the refrigerator because it's nolad. Okay, there's nolad. You're going from a liquid state into a solid state. Again, it's only for Ashkenazim because we don't have this issue of nolad. We don't have a problem of nolad, of something being produced. Our issue would be tzchita. Okay, but he says don't do it. V'diavad b'chol inyan mutar. Says no, but diavad you could make. Okay, it's not really a problem. But then he writes of a lola hakil lechatchila. But don't say it's okay to do right away. Why? The then yesh od's problem of lisha, of kneading. It's like you're making a dough, you're making a jello, you're putting the powder in the water. It might be a problem of kneading. So he says, don't do it. That's Rav Wozner. Now here, right? I know they when it comes to lush, it comes to lisha, they're always saying it's a problem of lisha, even if you don't see it. It's like it's some form of kneading. It looks far away kneading issue. But let's see for Sfaradim, what do we say about this making jello? So here, Rabbi Nachson, he writes in his beautiful sefer, he writes as follows: It is permitted to make jello on Shabbat for Sfaradim by pouring hot water from a klisheni, right? So it's Eroi klisheni, it's definitely a klishishi, onto powder, and even placing it into the fridge to harden. No issue of making instant jello on Shabbat for Sfaradim. Okay, he brings this actually from the Chazon Avadia, Shabbat Volume 4, page 281. So for us Sfaradim, we can really enjoy, making jello, making ice, melting ice, no problemos. Ashkenazim are more machmir. They have this issue of nolad that they're going with the sefer Truma, and they only really allow it if it's not nicker. And here in the jello, it's very nicker, right? The Shevet Levi was thinking shouldn't allow it. And he didn't even bring down any issue of lisha of kneading, like Pinchas said. Where's the kneading here? I'm putting it in water into powder, right? It's like similarly to putting coffee into water, right? Where's there's no lisha there? It's powder in there. So Lamaisa for us, you could make Jello on Shabbat. Okay, what? Yeah, and that's the halakha Lamaisa over here. Okay, now that we finished this section, we're going to now start. So up until now, we were really dealing. Over those last section wasn't really Bishul, but it had some connection to it. These are really Bishul deoraita. All these cases of Kli Rishon, Kli Sheni, Yatsu Ledid Bo, Ein Bishul Acher Bishul, Yavish Lach. All these issues were issues of Bishul deoraita. But the Chachamim came and made gezerot in order to prevent people from being Mechalel Shabbat, because part of Shabbat is Onik Shabbat, enjoying Shabbat. And how are we Onik Shabbat? What do we do to Onik Shabbat? Food. Food is a very big staple of Onik Shabbat. Okay? So people, and one of the ways to make Onik Shabbat is by eating warm food on Shabbat. Right? The people who go just by the book, it says Lo Tavaru Esh B'chol Moshavotechem, right? It says in Parashat Ve'akil Pekudei, it says don't make a fire. They take it legit, straight through, no fire. They cannot eat anything warm. They cannot leave fire on in the house. It's everyone Onik Shabbat. So we say Onik Shabbat, eating hot food. So the Chachamim came and said, yes, Onik Shabbat is about eating hot food, but we got to be careful because some people want to say, they say, they say in order for Chavot Shabbat, you can do it. It's okay. The Onik Shabbat. They might go ahead and say something is permissible where it's not. So the Chachamim came and they made gezerot in order to prevent someone from going wrong in order to be Onik Shabbat. So there are three main gezerot when it comes to Bishul, what's called Bishul D'Rabbanan, issues of Bishul D'Rabbanan on Shabbat. The three of them are, what's number one? Shehiyah. What's Shehiyah? Shehiyah. Shehiyah. What is that? Shehiyah. To leave it on the fire. Okay? If I leave an actual pot on the fire, what would be the issue? Why the Chachamim got scared and said, I can't leave it on a direct fire?
It's going to be boiled.
No. I already started cooking before.
Fire away.
I start playing with the fire. Stoking the coals and doing stuff like that. There are definitely an issue of Bishul.
Only if the fire is visible.
That's the whole thing of Shehiyah.
If it's a plata,
that's the whole issue of Shehiyah. The Chazal forbade us from leaving open a fire to prevent someone from actually stoking the coals.
Right.
That's the gezerah of Shehiyah.
That's why we put the plata on top of it.
Okay, we're gonna get into that's why we put a plata.
Really? Put stuff on it for Shabbat, not Shabbat start.
Yeah, he's gonna stoke the coals, move the coals, and do things. That's the issue. That's Shehiyah. Okay, now what's the second gezerah d'Rabbanan? We're on page 119. What's the second gezerah? Hazara, returning. What's the issue with returning? Also, you might play with the fire, and also mechazek kimivasho. It looks like you're cooking. So the Chachamim put certain gezerot when you're allowed to return the food to the fire. And the third gezerah d'Rabbanan, when it comes to Bishul b'Shabbat, is hatmana. What's hatmana? Insulating food. Okay, insulating before Shabbat and insulating on Shabbat. There's two types of insulation. There's an insulation that retains the heat, and there's insulation that increases the heat. Okay, and how they play out will be the next couple shiurim. We'll start with today Shehiyah, and then we'll go to Hazara, and then we'll go to Hatmana. Okay, now on page 120, there's a few more ideas we have to remember in order to go through these gezerot d'Rabbanan. The first thing, something that is raw. What is considered raw? Okay. Raw, look at number 1 on page 120. Raw, something which has not yet been heated to the temperature of Yad Soledidbo. Anything that's not gone to Yad Soledidbo is considered raw. Okay? Ma'achal ben Dursai. Ma'achal ben Dursai. Ben Dursai was a bandit. And he didn't have time for your clove or any food to finish. He needed it right away, so the authorities couldn't find him. So how much is that considered cooked? So Rashi says it's a third cooked. The Rambam says it's a half cooked. Well, halacha, we go with the Rambam, half cooked. Okay, if it's less than half cooked, if it's a third, it's considered raw. Well, halacha. Okay? I don't know. Half cooked. Half cooked. So what would half cooked be? Yeah, okay. Medium, fine. We have the chef in the house. I can't argue. I don't know. Okay. Okay, so good. That's actually the next thing. Mevushal called tzarcha. Completely cooked. That means the food is cooked normally. That's eaten by average people. But that doesn't mean that it cannot continue to benefit from being on the fire. It can cook more. It can get better. What's that called? Mitztamek v'yafelo. Okay? It contracts. It gets smaller because it's staying on the fire longer, but it's better for the fire. Better for the food. That is also considered cooking. Okay? That's also going to be considered cooking in many situations. Mitztamek v'yafelo. Then you have another one. It's mitztamek v'ralo. That's one if it's already cooked to saturation. You cook it more, it's going to get ruined. Right? If you leave it on the grill too long, right, it's going to get ruined. It's going to be too hard or everything. You can't eat it anymore. That's mitztamek v'ralo. Okay?
And in Friday, it's cooked. And in Shabbat, it's mitztamek v'yafel.
Okay. So we all got this? Then we already know about Yad Soledidbo. We talked about Yad Soledidbo. We talked about warming up liquid. And we talked about something that cool complete. Okay. Now, the Mishnah Brura, when he starts with the Gezerot of the Rabbanan on Bishul, starting with Shehiyah, he brings down a review. He brings down a review of what you have to know. So take a look at the bold Shehiyah on page 121. What is Shehiyah? He says, okay, so there in the Talmudical times there were 3 types of ovens, right? 3 types of cooking things. There was a tanur, there was a kira, and there was another one, a puach or something like that. Okay, those are the 3 types of ovens. Yeah, if you want, I can look it up what the third one was. So here we're talking about a kira. What was a kira? How many holes it had on top to put a pot on? 2. Okay. Here we go. I'll show you the ovens. Ovens in the back of the Talmudical times. Right, that's the kira on the next page. You have on page 122. That's a picture of a kira. Okay, so the 3 types of ovens they had cooking was kira, kefuach, and tanur. Okay, so kira was a double. The kefuach was 1, and a tanur was the hottest of them all. Okay, yeah, the cone shape or whatever. So we're talking here about a kira. It's a double stove top. Okay, inside, take a look at page 122. So inside is the coals, right? This is where you put the coals. This is like, for example, in Bukhari you have the oshton, right? Right? It's a fire underneath it. This one is what, gas or coals? Coals, but this is only 1 pot on the top. So kira has two pots. Okay, so that's a kira. Now, what about this kira? So, a guy wants to put a cooked food on top of it. Loider chatmona. He's not even insulating it, right? And he wants to take it directly off. Okay?
The pot. Take
Right.
the pot.
So he's putting the pot there, no blech, no hot plate,
Nothing.
straight. So that's when you have an issue, and that's where you have this gezerah of shehiyah, when it's talking about such a case. Now, there's a machloket in the Gemara. There's a machloket of Hananiah
Chachamim.
and the Chachamim of when you need to be worried about putting a pot on the fire. Remember, the issue is it might come to stoke the coals. So when is that issue going to happen? So, according to Hananiah, if the food has already been cooked to Machel ben Drusai, which means halfway, it's permitted to leave it on the stove, right? It's permitted, according to Hananiah, if as long as it's halfway cooked, you're allowed to leave it on the kira, even if the coals are still there. And you didn't do grufa ketuma. Grufa is when you remove, right? You have the mangal full of coals, the barbecue, and you take out all the coals. That's grufa. What is ketuma? Ketuma is when you put ashes or something cold on top of it to stop the flames. Okay? That's ketuma. So as long as the food is halfway cooked, as you're understanding that machal ben drusai is considered cooked, you don't have to do either of those things. You can leave it there. The chachamim sira, the asur, im en grufa v'ktuma, elim kein nitvashel kol torcho u'mitztamek beralo. Chachamim say, no, you cannot leave it there. Because you're still worried he's going to mess with the coals. Unless the food is completely cooked to the extent that if you leave it longer on the fire, it's going to get ruined. Because then he won't play with it. Because he doesn't want it to get ruined. Okay, so it's huge difference over here. Okay, the Tanakh Hananiah says, as long as it's halfway cooked, you can leave it on the fire, no problem. Even if the coals are still there, everything's fine. You can leave it. Chachamim say no, it has to be completely cooked. It has to be so cooked that if you cook it more, it gets ruined. Then you can leave it on the direct fire. Otherwise, you have to remove the coals or put the ashes over the coals to stop the heat. Okay, now the Rif and the Rambam, they paskin like the Chachamim. And Rashi and Tosfot paskin like Hananiah. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Shulchan Aruch brings two. He brings a data rifa Rabam in the first opinion. Vayesh omrim shemevi hamechaber b'sof sif aleph hu data Rashi v'Tosfot. And this is going to be explained in the Shulchan Aruch, says the Mishnah Berurah. So that's the first thing to know. Now that we're getting into Shia. Okay, so he brings here in the source. He brings source 2. He brings the actual Gemara. He brings the Mishnah and the Gemara that deals with this and where this is seen. Where Hananiah and the Chachamim, and we can go through that source of Kira. Depends on the fuel you use. If the fuel is long lasting or short lasting. But B'ezrat Hashem, next week we'll pick up with the halacha of what it is halacha l'maaseh. The Ramah l'maaseh holds like the Rashi and Tosfot. We're going to see even the Sfaradim, even though the Mechaber brings the drift from the Rambam first, we're going to see Chamabaji says we hold like the Ramah as well, like Rashi and Tosfot, and technically you can leave a dish that's halfway cooked on a direct fire. The issue with that is you can't do Chazara afterwards. But we'll get into that more next week. We have 10, right? אדוני חפץ למען צדקו יוליד תורה מידיה.
Amen.